think about this? I mean, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you. I'm sure this doesn't surprise you.
It's kind of a familiar story at this point, right? We were here with Ghostbusters. It seems like any time a woman steps forward and tries to put her toe in the water for a male-dominated field, we're right back here. It's so frustrating.
Do you think, and the social media platforms have been, they say, working hard. Twitter has made a lot of changes to fight online harassment, but does this go to show they're just not getting it or doing enough?
You know what I'm thinking? Your first story was about Facebook moving to more privacy. And I feel like part of the backlash of women just being exhausted with being targeted online, it makes sense that people would want to move towards more private social profiles. So I think it's hand in hand, and I think it's just exhausting for all of us dealing with
So
this
you
stuff.
think that privacy is a gendered issue?
I do,
essentially.
Absolutely, I do. Well, it affects men too, for sure, but yeah.
So do you think that because these, they're trying to get out of control, and Mark Zuckerberg will see what a more private Facebook actually looks like, but does this mean we need legislation?
Well, I think that there is certainly a role in Washington for us to address what women face both in the tech industry and what users face on the other side. Something we've seen is really big promises from Facebook, from Twitter, from Reddit, from all these companies that they're going to address this situation. For me, looking at this, in 2019, it's very hard for me to point to one thing that's concretely changed for women in the tech industry. So I do think Washington has a role to play.
What does that regulation look like?
Well,
and I know this is something that you campaigned on.
Absolutely. So I think it starts with letting these companies know that Washington's going to take it seriously. In the video game industry, famously, they held hearings about violence in the 90s. And then the video game industry looked at it and said, oh, if we don't get serious about this, they're going to regulate our field. And then our industry formed the ESRB and self-regulated, and it works amazingly well. What I think will happen is if you have people in Washington sitting on the Science, Space, and Technology Subcommittee looking at this, that threat of real legislation coming down the pipe will cause these companies to finally do the right thing.
Now, you were last on when my book came out in hardcover, and now it is out in paperback, and you're an important character in the book. How much progress do you think there's been for women in technology in the last year?
So when I stood up to Gamergate, I really believed that it was going to be a moment in 2014 and 2015 that really changed the tech industry. I wish I could tell you that happened. Very little fundamentally changed in this field. We're still seeing women software engineers not treated fairly. You yourself just did a story about how venture capital funds, only 2% went to women last year. This isn't because women can't compete in these fields, it's that we're not getting a fair shake. So I think we've got a lot of work to do.
Now, you weaved these issues into your 2018 campaign. You lost, but you're back in the saddle and you're running again.
Yes.
How are these issues and how is technology going to play in your 2020 campaign, and what are you going to do differently?
Well, the big thing that I learned in my 2018 race, and by the way, I got 17,000 votes over that, was that you can't run a political campaign like a startup. I come from the startup world. My very first startup was when I was 19 for $250,000. And I thought that formula would work, like having a small team of people I shared values with. This time around, we're being more traditional. We're hiring people with decades of experience. We're running a more traditional campaign.
So what do you think what will be your tech platform?
I think it's almost amorphous, but I think people in tech just want someone in Washington that understands their issues, that they can have a conversation about, whether it's from cybersecurity, harassment, trying to launch IPOs, all these different issues. I come from that field, so I understand these things. So I think they're just looking for technological literacy.
So, it's going to be what a year and a half of of fighting. A lot could happen in that time. We're potentially waiting for federal privacy legislation. What do you think what's the single most important issue to you in 30 seconds?
Well, the biggest issue for me is what people in my district are facing, particularly with wealth inequality and not being able to make a living wage. That's the #1 issue. So, we're talking about kitchen table issues, health care, income inequality, being able to send your kids to college, issues like that.